Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman podcast.
The buyer was on that person's LinkedIn profile before they had decided to either reach back out or move to a next step. They were doing their due diligence on that person, and LinkedIn is just one form of it. It could have been a Google search, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. This is always happening.
Hello Sales Nation, I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, and welcome to today's show. On today's show we have Jamie Shanks, and we're diving into personal branding. What worked for Jamie, what didn't. He's very candid about his responses. He gives us a couple of failures, and Jamie, listening back to this, mate, I really appreciate you diving into all of that because not everyone would. You can find out more about Jamie over at salesforlife.com. If you want to learn more about social selling, there's only one book that I can recommend on the subject at the moment, and that is Jamie's new book. You can grab that over at salesman.red/mastery, or on Amazon. It's called Social Selling Mastery. Highly recommended. I've got a copy of it myself, and great read. And so with that all said, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hey Jamie, welcome back to the Salesman podcast.
Thank you very much for the invite.
You are more than welcome. So today I want to get into personal brand, whether it is worth our time developing it now, because it's a compounding kind of attribute that salespeople have, and obviously over time it gets more and more important, perhaps. So I want to get your thoughts on this, and to paint a picture in the minds of the audience and both myself, because I know you've got some personal experiences with all this. If you were reaching out to a prospect right now in 2016, what do you think the chances are of them, if they like your engagement, if they are thinking about coming back to you, what's the chances of them Googling you?
I actually believe it's near 100%. In fact, one of our customers tried to prove that, and what they'd done is they took a look at all the deals they had done in 2015, and they went into LinkedIn profiles and they date stamped timelines between when a sales interaction was happening via email and phone versus when that person had reviewed that sales professional's LinkedIn profile. As an example, this is a form of, to your question around Google. And dollars to donuts, the buyer was on that person's LinkedIn profile before they had decided to either reach back out or move to a next step. They were doing their due diligence on that person, and LinkedIn is just one form of it. It could have been a Google search, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. This is always happening. I'm always doing this to our vendors as well. I need to know, am I forming the right partnerships? I want to read glassdoor.com. What's it like inside that company? Am I going to partner or work with a company where the employees hate that organization? That's important to me. So to answer your question, I would honestly think in today's age, it's nearly 100%.
And I'm leading you down a little bit of a funnel here, but is this going to become more or less important as time goes on, as more information's put online, as things become more open, perhaps?
I honestly share the same mentality of a Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone calls it omnipresence. And what will happen in every industry, every sub-industry, you will have a filtration process of those that become subject matter experts, the go-to people. And you could, in our industry, in your industry, you already know who those players are, but it will start happening in every industry. And what will happen is those 10, 15, 40, however many people are going to be the go-to resource and where most people migrate for information, next steps, due diligence, what have you. So being part of that top ecosystem should be the goal, should be the ultimate goal. And I can't stress it enough. This is the takeaway that I get from Grant Cardone is I look at my microcosm of a world, which is sales training, sales enablement, sales productivity. And my job is to be top of mind globally, within that top 50 people. And that's what I should be concentrating every day on.
And is that you personally, or is that Sales for Life, just to make that differentiation there?
It's difficult sometimes to separate Sales for Life and myself. I mean, ultimately, as you scale, the ultimate goal is that Sales for Life is much larger than any one person. But everything that I do better serves Sales for Life, and everything that a Marsh Chef, Dave Howe, Brian Lip, my business partner George Albert, everyone around that ecosystem is building a personal brand that ultimately better serves the customer through information for Sales for Life. But yeah, the personal brand is the piece that I can first control. So I'll concentrate on that.
Yeah, because the reason I ask that is that there'll be some people listening to this now, of the 10 to 20,000 salespeople that are tuning in, that are perhaps skeptical of this because they've never had to really have had a personal brand in the past. They could close a deal by, especially in the B2B world, just adding value, having a great product, and all these little puzzle pieces fall together. And it allows you, and I've done this before, in my early days in medical devices, it allows you to close a deal and then just never follow up with that person again once you've got your commission, because the repercussions of that are never going to be made public. They are never going to be traceable back to you. It kind of goes back to the organization, if anything. Yeah. Is that going to change? Is the follow up, is the happy and unhappy people and almost reviews, are they going to become more and more kind of public domain as time goes forward as well?
Yeah, I'm watching it in our organization that it really, maybe because I'm in a services business, so it is such a people to people relationship. So I look at Brian and Jason and team members of ours that are selling the deal, and then they're bringing the deal into customer success with Amar and Dave and so forth. But what's happening is the original relationship was still established with Jason and Brian. And weeks or months into the engagement, they still want to deal with the person. They want to deal with a person that they trust and that they like and that they got to know. And you know, as a scaling organization, that as a business owner, I mean, the first couple of years of deals in my company were done by me. And so over time, the difficult part of scale in a services business, somebody like myself, is letting go, because every customer wants to deal with you because you were that original relationship. But to answer your question, this is just going to be the reality. People buy from people they like, and people like people just like themselves. They want to feel that they're dealing with a like-minded individual. You have to build a personal brand that people can relate to, that is real and authentic, and that they say, this is somebody that I want in my office, can help me.
Okay, so which weighs more now? Because I don't know where you're going to go with this one. To use your words, which weighs more, being the subject matter expert or being the super keen, the salesperson who's constantly offering value to that individual, perhaps not to the industry to become subject matter expert, but to that individual? For the buyer, and the answer might be it depends, I'm not sure, but who are they more likely to go to? Who are they more likely to spend money with? The subject matter expert or the person who's working really hard to help them personally?
So I'll tell it through a story. And bear with me, I promise this won't be more than about 90 seconds. And it's the story of one of our enterprise sales professionals, Jason, tells to all of our customers. So he was working at Epicor, and he had a competitor in Western Canada selling Western Canadian deals, and Jason is selling Western Canadian deals. The first 5 major deals that he was working on in Western Canada, he lost 1, lost 2, lost 3, 4, and 5. He couldn't figure out, why am I losing all of these deals? And I'm losing to the same person. So at enterprise deals, they do postmortems where they evaluate and they talk to the vendor or talk to the customer. Why did we lose? Where did we go wrong? And every single one of these large organizations said that competitive sales professional was seen in Western Canada as a thought leader, constantly sharing best practices, pitfalls, challenges, roadmaps. This person became the voice to the industry and the IT Epicor world industry for Western Canada, and we felt we could trust him as an advisor. And so it was a major eye-opener for Jason, where he recognized that he needed to approach in a way of being that consultant and trusted advisor, and that magnet ecosystem of, I'm going to be the person that teaches everyone in my core area, whether that's an industry or geographic territory, what are best practices. So I don't know if that answered your question, directly, but through the story, I would think that when I look at the growth of my business, now 20 people, it was grown by being a subject matter expert, not just to one person, but not forgetting about that one customer that you had, but it was being a subject matter expert to the industry. And it was grown through a magnet process. I hope that answered the question.
It does massively. And let me just interlude because I'm glad you said that, because I totally agree. And there's a split, probably 70-30 people come on the show that do agree and don't agree with this. A lot of the people coming on the show to talk about similar kind of topics go down the lines of, well, salespeople should be selling. That's their job. Whereas I feel slightly different, and this might twist I might be putting words in your mouth here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but it's almost I feel it's almost guaranteed to be a great return on your time invested into yourself to spend whatever arbitrary amount of time, an hour a day, working on your personal brand, that over 5 years' time, that pays out way more to you in the amount of leads coming to you directly, your thought leadership, how easy it is to close because people want to work with you very specifically. That 1 hour a day working on your personal brand, I feel after 5 years, outweighs an hour extra of cold calling, emailing, whatever it is. Is that something you agree with as well?
5 years ago to the date, I was bankrupt and I had 0 employees and I didn't have a business. Now, 5 years later, we have a multi-million-dollar business with 20 employees. And it was because I dedicated every single day up front. In the first couple of years, it was more than an hour a day to developing a personal brand and ensuring, and a lot of it was around influencer selling. Mm-hmm. So I was attaching myself to the industry leaders, the Ken Krogs, Trish Bertuzzi, Anna Casilli, Jill Conrath. I made sure that they knew who I was, and they knew who I was. Maybe I said that twice, but I made sure I was part of that higher echelon that I talked about. At the same time, I also recognized where I was failing 5 years ago was I was 100% pure sales. Call, email. Like all the things that we all know now are not the ideal cadence. I unzipped that skin and I put on another layer, which is I saw myself also could contribute to a marketing function as well, for myself at first, and then for the greater good of an organization. But a great sales professional carries a little bit of marketing with them at all times, and they see that there's selling to an individual and then attracting a larger audience within my, industry, geographic node, whatever I'm going after. Every day I'm doing both, helping the individual and helping my entire community. So that's the 5-year run rate, right? So
definitely, and we're going to dive into that and perhaps how you did things as a practical example in a second. But a quick anecdote for myself. Regular listeners will know that I still sell all the ad space on the podcast and a few other things that we're doing as well, so that I can talk about. Well, I can test what we talk about on the show. I can be a practitioner, and I'm still actively selling rather than just talking about sales. The problem that I've got at the moment, and it's a great problem to have, is that the ad space is getting filled up by people coming to me that want to advertise on the show. Clearly, as the show grows, more and more people get knowledge of it, and so there's the same amount of companies in the sales industry that want to be part of it, versus there's more kind of people talking about the show within the industry. So I knew this was going to happen, but it's actually become a problem now in that the ad space sells itself, and I don't really have to sell anything. So it's clearly a good problem to have, and this is 6, 8, 12 months into building the show and the audience. So I'm not really kind of doing it by I'm kind of doing this by osmosis versus very actively trying to network with industry leaders and people within the industry. Of course, they come on the show to get value at being on the show. They want to come back on, so I'm offering them value through that point. But I'm not. I'm doing a poor job of networking with them and talking around the industry and that kind of thing. So if I'm doing this sluggishly, it seems like an hour a day for someone being super focused. They could have real impact, and we're talking 5 years, but perhaps in 12 months they could have a real impact with this. So that leads me to the question, Jamie. Why isn't everybody doing this? It seems like a no-brainer.
I remember talking about this, I think, a little bit on the last episode. as a training organization, I study learning and behavior. And what I have learned over 5 years is that most people, for the same reason most people don't become entrepreneurs, because it's hard. It is hard. It's not hard in the sense, it is not hard to become an effective social seller. It's hard to change. The biggest obstacle is changing your mindset and changing your daily routine. And I only learned that by failure and becoming an entrepreneur and seeing how hard it is to dig a ditch. And I think, and when I look at we've trained 65,000 sales professionals. So when I look at who really is the best performers, that top 20%, these are people that are constant learners. These are people that are sitting in the front of the classroom. They are truly people that are doing whatever they can to better themselves. It has nothing to do with social selling. It has to do with bettering themselves. And so I think why most people won't do it is most people are comfortable taking their named accounts, working them the way that they have, cutting out at 5 o'clock. It has nothing to do with social selling at this point. It has to do with behavioral change. And it's sad, but I would say that that's the part that people can make the biggest impact, is just change their mindset, change the skill set, and start doing it. Is 50% of it.
Cool. Okay, so enough of the high level talk now. Let's get really practical with this, and so the audience can, after listening to this show in their lunch hour, perhaps make a couple of real practical steps towards improving their personal brand. Where do we start? Because it seems we could create a website or a blog and start writing on there. We could start doing more of the social selling side of things if we're not already of sharing and curating content rather than creating it. It seems that we could create a podcast and interview our buyers or something along those lines, and you're kind of almost infiltrating it by stroking their egos at that point. We could create videos, we could do all sorts. Where is the biggest bang for buck place to start with building our personal brand?
I'll tell you how I did it. So you're now talking about the summer of 2011. I have no money, I'm bankrupt, and I need to rebuild a business. And so I would sit in our spare bedroom 3 a.m, and I started this plan of attack. I basically did a micro and a macro strategy, and I'll explain both. The first was I recognized that my buyer, VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, are attracted to industry leaders. And so I would get to know, so this would be my influencer marketing, so my macro strategy. I would get to know those people that my buyers read, admire, are attracted to, and I would get on their radar. And you know who's done, as an example, in just recently, there's a lady in our industry, Lindsay Boggs. She's done a fantastic job of identifying those that are leading the sales performance space, the sales training space, and she's started to work and align with these people, and it's increased her overall brand awareness. Okay, so that's an example of it. So every day I was liking, commenting, sharing with these individuals. I would connect with them, ask if we could do a joint podcast, webinar, ebook. I didn't have the infrastructure to do a podcast like this. I didn't have the infrastructure to write a blog, but I could be a guest contributor. So I was a guest contributor for a long time on ebooks and podcasts and so forth. So that was the macro strategy. The micro strategy is still the core to a lot of our sales methodology, called the sphere of influence. The sphere of influence is a really simple concept. If I wanted to sell to your company, the only people that care about the story of trying to sell, the only people that would ever care about the Sales for Life story, as an example, would be people that used to work at Sales for Life, people that work there today, people that compete with Sales for Life, people that are partners or vendors to Sales for Life, and then people within my own personal sphere of influence, like university alumni. So what I did is I took every customer that I'd ever had, and I literally took a sheet of paper and I drew this spider web called the sphere of influence. And it's basically a roadmap of, if I have a great customer success story, like yesterday I was at ADP. So that's going to be my baseline. Draw a circle in the middle. I then drew a spider web of people that would care about hearing the success story of ADP. So I mapped out on LinkedIn every person that used to work at ADP that is now a VP of sales or VP of marketing. I would tag their accounts on LinkedIn. Then I would look at every one of their competitors, and I would tag the VP of sales and VP of marketing at their competitors, and so forth. And I built this chart that showed if I'm going to tell the story of ADP, I'm only going to tell the story to people that have a firsthand knowledge or care about that story. And so then I would call, email, LinkedIn message, write an article, share it with somebody, whatever I needed to do. I'd make a video. I made a ton of videos, and I would send it via email or social message to a decision maker about the story of working with ADP as an example. What that did was I took one customer success story and multiplied it to 3 new customers. Those 3 customers, each then I did a sphere of influence, and it turned each those into 3. And now you do this over time, we have 300 customers. And so all we do is you sell a story, a success story, to people that would actually care because they could relate to that success story. And that was the micro and macro strategy that built the business.
How do you, that's a fantastic, you could ignore everything else in the episode. I think salespeople could just do what you just described.
Just fast forward to this part, yeah.
Just do exactly what you just described, and in a year's time could practically double the revenue that they're doing. So that is a tidbit that will come out and be a separate video, I'm sure, on YouTube that we'll talk about on another time on the episode, but on the show. But how do you measure how influential you are? Because this salespeople like numbers. I very specifically am super into the numbers and the metrics, and it's something I find difficult for myself. And there's a follow-up question to this as well of, should you really care about how influential you are from a numbers perspective versus how effective it is, if that makes sense?
So frankly, I used to actually care about that stuff. And it was a vanity thing. So I used to care what my clout score was, or I used to care that I was on those top 100 sales professional, those lists. After being in the industry long enough, you recognize how you get on those lists. A lot of times it's your friends that make these lists, or vendors to your company, or whatever it is. All fluffy crap means nothing to you having a personal brand. When you know you have a personal brand that's working, is when people are asking for your advice, when potential customers or industry experts are calling you, asking you to partake in either marketing initiatives, podcasts, ebooks, and so forth, and or customers are coming out of the woodwork, or potential buyers are coming out of the woodwork and messaging you, calling you, asking your advice. That's when you've now realized you've created a next level brand for yourself. There's always levels, and I don't even know what all those levels would be. But I remember when inbound started. Well, the second that inbound starts, you've now, in your geo or industry, have taken your brand to another level, because now people want your advice and they're seeking you out. And that should be your benchmark. Your benchmark should be where you could, and I guess I don't know how you measure this, because I think all the current measurements of brand are ineffective. Your real litmus test is people, potential buyers, wanting to reach out to you, and you have a bluebird of a new deal that just came out of the woodwork because they found you. That was for me always the litmus. And I had to learn to discount all the other size of your social networks and being on the top 100 lists. I mean, frankly, most of the people on those top 100 lists are barely even, could barely scratch together a living. And so that, I'm looking at it as something very, very different.
I love this. You're clearly, 5 years ahead of me in my journey of all this, but you're describing the process I'm going through again. And the reason I asked you whether you should care about it is because exactly the same. I was concerned about how many Facebook followers we had. I was concerned about my clout score. And then as soon as I realized that all that stuff is dumb, it doesn't really move the needle. And then how I judge things now is how many emails a day I get from Sales Nation, people listening to this, asking me sales advice. Exactly. Literally, there's an email that came in just before we got on the air of a guy who is in medical device sales. He wants to move on beyond that. So kind of he's hit his kind of cap with what he can get target-wise, and he's looking for the next step. So that what we're talking about now is perhaps where he should be aiming to. He then becomes an industry consultant, perhaps even as a salesperson, but he becomes more and more senior within that company. And surely at that point, when you've got inbound leads coming to you, you're almost unsackable at that point, aren't you?
Well, so that's the way that if you're talking from a sales professional that's working at an organization, that's the way you should be looking at it, where you're such a magnet in the organization that people say, like, I have to do whatever it takes to ensure that Johnny or Susie is happy and is successful in our business, because customers are coming to her. Like that's your ultimate litmus test. And forget all the lists, means nothing.
So I want to come back to one thing here, and we'll wrap up the show with this. This influencer side of things and how to get in there on their radar, and how very practically we go about this. Only the other day, Grant Cardone put out a video which he mentioned you at the beginning of it, talking about social selling and I guess how his thoughts he was going down there. I've asked Grant to come on the show loads of times, but I did a video ripping into him a little bit a little while back. So he commented on the video, and some of his team did as well. So he's probably not my biggest fan, but I love the work that he does in the area of sales that he deals with. And and I was happy to see you get mentioned. And again, it kind of ties all this back together of having that team of would you call it a team, a group of influencers around you. And once you are, because there's influencers at different levels as well, and if you find a group of influencers that are your level, you can kind of cross promote everything that you're doing and increase the reach with everything that you put out there, whether it's content or whatever it is. So first question, first place to stop on this is, how do we know what people we should be reaching out to and trying to get on board with? And then how do we go about it? Keep it in the perspective of the B2B sales professional who wants to up their game personal brand wise.
Yeah. So I'll make it as tactical as I can. So as I mature, so does the goal of the influencers that I want to reach with. So when I started, I recognized my core buyer was a local Toronto VP of sales. So I wanted to get to know those that in the local Toronto community were VPs of sales, were also kind of sales consultants. And so I used Twitter. At that point, Twitter is fantastic for influencer searching. So I would do keyword searches in local geos and start to identify who are the people in Twitter that people listen to. And I would use Twitter lists. So I would go on a VP of sales account. So I remember one of our board members, Terry Foster, he's the president of Cision Canada. I'd go onto his Twitter account, and he had lists of people he found were interesting to follow. Well, I'd see if I did Terry and 5 or 6 other CEOs or VPs of sales, they all had the same people they were following. So I would tag those people, build them into a list, and so that's the first piece. That's the list building. You have to organization is the key. The second piece now is, what is my game plan? My game plan is the law of reciprocity. You have to understand that I can't ask before I give. So I need to like, comment, share. I need to send them an article they may never have seen. I need to promote them, even though I'm a peon. I need to promote them and show them that they are amazing. And I don't know how it happens. It just happens that you'll just notice that they then connect with you and like you, and then start noticing things you're doing because they see a little bit of themselves in you or whatever it is. And then once there's some sort of horse trading of engagement, that's when I started reaching out formally and saying, how can we do, and trying to formulate some business together. They're not interested. Remember, they're higher on the mountain. They see you much lower on the mountain. So can we do some sort of cross marketing? For them, that's easy. Let's do a podcast, an ebook, a webinar together. For them, that's low friction, easy to do. But all of a sudden, and this is the core to it all, is you have to understand that the best part about influencer marketing is I'm able to suck and steal their contacts, their leads, their network, and bring them over to my world. So the more, and we call it Operation Land Grab, the more of these guest bloggings and guest events that I do with other companies, I'm taking their data and putting them into my pocket. So we just started doing this over and over. And as we grew, so does the benchmark of people you start going after. Then it becomes the top social sellers. Then it became the industry sales leaders. Now it truly becomes like the ZS Associates and the Deloitte and Touches and the Forresters and the Gartners of the world. It just depends on what your goals are, right? And so this game of influencer marketing and Operation Land Grab just keeps ratcheting itself up to absorb their network into your network. I hope that was as tactical as possible.
Fantastic. And final question on this before I run through a couple of questions, ask everyone that comes on the show. Where should we be aiming for with this? So clearly you alluded to it then that it essentially never ends. You get to, well, then you're mingling.
Well, it depends on your goal. My goal is a truly global scale with our curriculum around the world. So that game probably will never end for me. But for a sales professional and my local, I am the sales professional for Florida, for medical device companies as an example. That game is to become the hotbed for Florida and every influencer in Florida. I don't necessarily need to know who the world's medical device experts are in Singapore and Australia. So it really depends on the goal.
Well, let me rephrase it and we'll reverse engineer it perhaps. How long do you think for the medical device salesperson in Florida do they need to commit to this blindly, have faith before they not see results, because they come early, I guess, in a lot of cases, but have really implemented themselves as an expert within Florida, within medical devices, within single like endoscopy or something like that? How long do they need to invest?
And I don't think sales professionals like this answer, and I think you know that answer. It's at least 1 year. I mean, I'm 5 years in, and I still feel like I'm in second gear. And so if I can still see what 4 more gears would look like, that's 5 years, right? And as you mentioned, you've been doing this 1 year to 18 months, and you've now clearly seen you have 10 to 20,000 attendees or registrants for your podcasts, for each podcast, but you probably have a goal of hundreds of thousands or 1 million. Well, you may feel you're in second gear, so you go, wow, it took me 1 year to get to here. It's gonna probably take this much longer to get to my goal. It's a lot longer than people think.
Definitely. Well, so I mean, just to wrap this up, context is everything for the audience, and something I really try and focus on with these shows. We've talked about Grant Cardone. It's very simple. Clearly, we're not big enough for Grant Cardone to come on the show for whatever reason. Obviously, he's a busy guy and all that kind of thing. But the influence, obviously, in 12 months' time, if we've gone from in 8 or 9 months from zero to 10, 20,000 downloads, my end goal of all of this is 100,000 downloads a show, and we do a show a day. So 100,000 downloads a day is the kind of end goal. But if at that point we can't get him on the show, we just can't get him on the show. So that is context for me. There's context for the audience as well. Of you perhaps don't need to get every single person on board that you set out on your initial kind of list of influencers. But what's important is, as you alluded to it then, hitting that specific goal so you can tick that off and then reassess at that point. Because I think, salespeople, it's very easy to get wrapped up into the day of all this, which is why when you say a year, people go, oh, I won't bother with that. Or they say, I'll start that in January. Or they say, I'll start that next year when I'm a bit more embedded into the territory, that kind of thing. And then you get wrapped up in the day-to-day, your customers complaining, your sales manager asking for this stupid report that you don't want to give him because it's taking up time where you could be selling, and all these things go on. And this is the crux of the whole conversation, Jamie, and I'm glad you've totally agreed with everything I've said. There's been no prep, no planning before this episode, so I'm glad on the front that clearly you're an expert in this industry, in this segment specifically. So it means I'm on the right track if I'm following in your footsteps and going down a similar path.
You're doing a fantastic job. Fantastic job.
And it just the context of it's kind of, I can see it, and then other people in the industry the salespeople listening to this can invest that year. And as I said, blindly, I just think there's massive value in this. And final question. Is this going to become more and more powerful over time, as in, are the people who have invested 5 years now, are they going to, the people who invest 5 years, let me rephrase that. The people who are experts now with X many salespeople competing, are the experts in 10 years' time going to have more power or less power?
I think more. So there's two parts to it. I think that those that are establishing a baseline now will control a huge segment of the voice. It is truly a land grab right now. But I also believe with technology, it's so easy to quickly establish yourself a voice. It's amazing what I watch. What took me 5 years, I'm watching people establish quick voices in 1 year. But I always come. There's a recent video by Robert Herjavec, and he said the big problem with entrepreneurs, they think that they can do in 1 year. You can't do, in his opinion, you can barely do anything in 1 year, but you will blow away what you think you could do in 10.
Yeah.
And that's hard to absorb. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay, that still means there's a long way to go. But, the goals that I set, my mind can't even think about, but I will destroy those goals in 10, but I could barely do anything in a year.
Definitely. Well, it just compounds over time. And with that, Jamie, I've got a couple of questions. I'm conscious of time, so I'll fly through these with you. First one, and these are quick fire questions. Which do you prefer, a beach holiday or a snow holiday?
So I was a competitive mogul skier, so I'm going to say ski holiday.
Nice. Okay, next one. Dollar size if possible. What's the biggest deal you've ever closed?
Biggest deal that we've ever done is 500, give or take 500,000 US dollars.
Nice. Okay, next one. What does the first 60 minutes of your day look like? Reading and a lot of cereal and fiber eating. Really, I am reading and sharing insights as the very first thing that I do in the morning. Nice. And I'm going to reframe this question because you've been on the show before, so you've already answered it once. But if you could sit down with every single person listening to the show now, one-on-one, but you could only offer them one piece of advice to help them become better at selling, what would be that one piece of advice?
Something that I'm trying to learn: patience. Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Well, with that, Jamie, I'm going to tell us a little bit about Sales for Life, and then really importantly, and this show is going to come out in the pre-launch kind of period, tell us a little bit about Social Selling Mastery and where we can find it.
Appreciate it. So Sales for Life, world's largest social selling training company. We wrote a book called Social Selling Mastery. It's based on the flagship training methodology that we offer today. And it is, I really wanted to create like Neil Rackham's spin selling. It is our business on the page. It will show you from an enablement standpoint, from sales leadership, marketing leadership, and sales professional, exactly how you scale social selling globally within your organization. And it comes out in mid-September, and I believe that you'll be putting a link to it, but it'll be offered on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, on Wiley's website. It's published by Wiley. I really hope that people pick it up.
Definitely. You've shared a link with us, so to clean up the link and make it easy for the audience, if you head over to salesman.red/mastery, you'll find all about the book and everything else there. And I appreciate that, Jamie. I appreciate your conversation. You've been very candid and shared some good stories, so I appreciate you being that open and honest with us as well. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman podcast.
Thank you very much.
And there we have it. Jamie, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it, mate. Thank you. I say it every episode. Sales Nation, for tuning in. Clearly, there'd be no show if it wasn't for you guys. I appreciate the attention that you give us and all the sharing that you do with your colleagues. And with that all said, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.